Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Shaima. We continue with the motor tracts. I've already finished discussing corticospinal tracts with you all. There are a few more descending pathways which needs to be done, which I'll be doing in today's class. I would just like to recollect few things which we have discussed in I think the first class. Descending pathways, if you all can remember, was earlier divided into pyramidal tracts and extrapyramidal tracts. Later on they found was, the division of the system was not exactly falling in place with those terms. So later on descending pathways were divided into the lateral system pathways and the medial system pathways. And this particular classification was based on the termination of the descending pathways on the motor neurons of the spinal cord, and also depending on the functions of the particular pathway. So please remember the corticospinal tract, which I have already discussed with you all, contained two: the anterior corticospinal tract and the ventral, or better would be the lateral corticospinal tract and the anterior corticospinal tract. Please remember this falls into these two classifications. The lateral system, the first division, would contain the lateral corticospinal tract, and the division of medial system pathway constitute the anterior corticospinal tract. So that means one pathway each from these two classifications we have already finished discussing. We have the remaining ones. So let's see what is remaining in the lateral column, the lateral system pathway. So basically the motor tract, which descends down in the lateral column of the spinal cord, we call as the lateral system pathway, and there are two tracts which belongs to that category. You have the lateral corticospinal tract and the rubrospinal tract. Lateral corticospinal tract we have already done. Now if you look at the rubrospinal tract, the fibers of these tracts, it's placed in the lateral funiculus in the spinal cord, and it terminates on the motor neurons that are placed laterally in the ventral horn of the spinal cord. And the function of the tract is basically the regulation of all the skilled movements and also the voluntary movements. We'll be going in detail on all these tracts. Now I'm just mentioning the classification. Now you have the second classification of the descending pathway or the motor pathways, and you call it as a medial system pathway. Why do you call it the medial system pathway? Because these tracts descend down in the medial and the anterior column of the spinal cord, and the tracts which come under this particular classification is the reticulospinal tract, the vestibulospinal tract, the tectospinal tract, the anterior corticospinal tract, which has been already done, and the interstitiospinal tract. Now one by one we'll go into detail. In the lateral system pathway, the first classification, the lateral corticospinal tract is already done. Now one more what is remaining is the rubrospinal tract. So please have a look at the figure. So we'll start as usual. Any motor tract, when you explain, you're going to draw the particular figure first, and then the headings which you are going to write the remaining contents is: first is going to be origin, then you have course, termination, functions, and a little of applied physiology. Now if you look at the origin of this tract, please have a closer look at the figure. Now the rubrospinal tract originates from the red nucleus, which is located in the midbrain, and exactly which part of the red nucleus? The magnocellular part. Now the red nucleus basically receives strong excitatory input from the motor cortex and also from the cerebellum. See, that's something which you need to keep in mind. So the origin of the rubrospinal tract is the red nucleus, the magnocellular part, which is located in the midbrain, and speciality of this red nucleus is it receives very strong excitatory input from cerebellum and also the motor cortex. Now have a look at the course of this tract. Immediately after originating, I think as I am explaining, you can keep on looking at the figure so that you get a clear a 3D picture, of the tract as, you try to recollect. So basically the course of the rubrospinal tract is immediately after originating from the red nucleus, the magnocellular part, the fibers cross over to the opposite side at the same level. Can't you see a very straight line? So which signifies that the crossing over, the decussation is happening at the same level. Now after they cross over to the opposite side, or they decussate to the opposite side, they descend down through the contralateral brain stem, and the fibers occupy the lateral column of the spinal cord. The fibers terminate on the lateral group of motor neurons that innervate the distal limb muscles. Now the rubrospinal tract basically excites the, you can see that here, it's ending on the lateral group of anterior horn cells, and the rubrospinal tract, the fibers arising from there basically stimulates the distal group of muscles, or the flexor group of muscles, and inhibits the extensor muscles. Now if you look at the function of the rubrospinal tract controls all the skilled voluntary movements, and the applied physiology of the rubrospinal tract is in an experimental animal, when there is a lesion of the rubrospinal tract, it will produce actually deficit in the muscles of the distal limb, especially with the flexor group of muscles. But what happens is, if the lateral corticospinal tract is intact, the deficit which is produced by the section of the rubrospinal tract will be there only temporarily, because later on, because both the tracts which belongs to the lateral system pathway, both the lateral corticospinal tract and the rubrospinal tract is concerned with the same function. So when one tract is damaged and the other tract is intact, the deficit in the movement will stay for a very short time. So that's about the rubrospinal tract. Now next you have the vestibulospinal tract. One second. Yeah, the rubrospinal tract is done. Now when you look at the vestibulospinal tract, this vestibulospinal tract, you need to know that before we actually go into the figure of the tract, there are 4 vestibular nuclei present. You have the lateral, medial, superior and inferior. All of them receives inputs from the otolith organs and also the semicircular canals. Now basically the vestibulospinal tract, it maintains the posture in response to any change in head position and also any kind of acceleration of the body. The vestibular nuclei, which hope you remember, the vestibular nuclei, you had the lateral, medial, superior and the inferior. All of them are reciprocally connected with the superior colliculi, reticular formation and the cerebellum. Now all these, they control the eye position during head movements and balance the body during any kinds of movements of your head. Now the vestibulospinal tracts are divided into 2. You have the lateral vestibulospinal tract and the medial vestibulospinal tract. So here in this picture you can see both the tracts drawn here, the lateral vestibular tract and the medial vestibulospinal tract. One second, let me just see if there is an individual figure. I think we'll have to go with this figure. So I just enlarge the figure. So first I'll tell you all, the course, the origin, course and the termination of the lateral vestibulospinal tract, and then I'll go to the origin, course and termination of the medial vestibular nucleus. Now if we look at the origin of the lateral vestibulospinal tract, it originates from the lateral vestibular nucleus, which is also called as the Dieter's nucleus, which is present in the brain stem. And if you look at the course of the tract, this tract, it's not decussating to the opposite side. From wherever it arises, that is the lateral vestibular nuclei, It descends down ipsilaterally through the brainstem and the spinal cord. And the fibers, as they are descending down, it occupies the ventral funiculus of the spinal cord, and it goes and terminates on the medial group of interneurons and also the motor neurons in the ventral horn of the spinal cord. It's very clearly seen in the picture. That's where the tract terminates. This tract extends throughout the rostrocaudal extent of the spinal cord. I think that's a very important point you need to keep in mind. And the function of the lateral vestibulospinal tract, it excites the motor neurons that basically supplies the proximal group of muscles to especially open point and to tell. It's basically the extensor muscles of the limbs. So, now with this origin, course and termination, we come to know from the function, it's very clear that the lateral vestibulospinal tract controls the posture in a human being. The input of the lateral vestibulonucleus comes mainly from the semicircular canals and the otolith organs of the inner ear, which I have already discussed in the previous slide. So, the lateral vestibulospinal tract controls the body posture in relation to angular and the linear accelerations of the head. Now, the clinical importance of the lateral vestibulospinal tract is in experimental animals. I think I'll just come to that. Yeah, you have it here. The clinical importance is in decerebrate animals. Now, how do you make, a decerebrate animal? It's after following a mid-collicular section, the lateral vestibulospinal tract becomes hyperactive. Why does it become hyperactive? It's due to the loss of the inhibitory control from the cortical areas which it had on it. Therefore, what happens is there is extensor rigidity happening, which is a hallmark of a decerebrate animal. In humans, brainstem lesions due to stroke or injury facilitates a vestibulospinal tract activity that manifests in the form of arms and leg rigidity. I think you will get a better clarity on this extensor rigidity and the decerebrate animal, all those things, when I will be discussing the upper motor neuron and the lower motor neuron in the next class. Now, coming to the next tract, we have the medial vestibulospinal tract. I go back to the figure because we had the same figure for the lateral vestibulospinal tract and the medial vestibulospinal tract. Now, here if you look at the figure, you can see that the origin of the medial vestibulospinal tract, it's from the medial vestibular nuclei, and the course is the MVST or the medial vestibulospinal tract. It descends down ipsilaterally in the brainstem. It is not decussating to the opposite side, and the ventral funiculus of the spinal cord. Now, till where does this tract extend? It extends up to the mid-thoracic spinal cord segments, and the fibers of this medial vestibulospinal tract, it terminates on, you can see it in the picture, very similar to the previous tract. It's terminating on the medial group of interneurons and the motor neurons, and the functions of the medial vestibulospinal tract is, again, it controls the body posture. The input to the medial vestibular nucleus comes mainly from the semicircular canals. So, therefore, what happens is the medial vestibulospinal tract adjusts the body posture in relation to the head position in response to an angular acceleration. I think that's a very important point you need to remember here. Both, you need to differentiate the function of the medial vestibulospinal tract and the function of the lateral vestibulospinal tract. So, that's about the lateral and the medial vestibulospinal tract. Now, you have the next one, the reticulospinal tract, which belongs to the medial system pathway. So, I think I'll just focus the figure. Yeah, I think before that, a little introduction into the reticulospinal tract. The core of the brainstem basically contains a reticular formation. Now, what are the kinds of inputs which is received by the reticular formation? It receives input from different structures like the vestibular nuclei, hypothalamus, cortex, spinal cord, etc. From so many structures, this reticular formation, which forms the core of the brainstem, receives continuous impulses. Now, the projection of the reticular nuclei to the spinal cord is important in the control of motor activity as they affect the motor neuronal excitability, especially in the gamma motor neurons. Now, in this functional aspect, you realize that there are two reticular nuclei which are very important. You have the nucleus reticularis pontus, which is in pons, and the nucleus gigantocellularis, which is present in the medulla. There are basically two main reticulospinal tracts, the pontine reticulospinal tract and the medullary reticulospinal tracts. Now, if you look at the functional importance, you understand that the reticulospinal tract are the most important medial system pathways to control our body posture. So, let us see what the pontine reticulospinal tract is. So, you have the figure focused here. So, basically the pontine reticulospinal tract, if you look at the origin, you can see that the tract is originating from nucleus reticularis pontus oralis and nucleus reticularis pontus caudalis, and these two structures are located in the pontine reticular formation. The course of the tract is, let us see how it comes down. Now again this tract, it is not decussating, it descends down ipsilaterally in the medial funiculus of the spinal cord. The fibers, where do they terminate? They terminate on, it's there in the picture. The fibers are terminating on the medial group of interneurons and motor neurons that innervate both the proximal and the axial group of muscles of your body. So that's about the course, the origin, the course and termination. Now, if you look at the function of the pontine reticulospinal tract, it is very similar to that of the lateral vestibulospinal tract. It excites the motor neurons which supplies the proximal extensor muscles which are involved in the regulation of posture. So, I think that is about the pontine reticulospinal tract. Now, you have the medullary reticulospinal tract, I think for which I do not have a figure here. So, I think you can just have a look at the same picture. Now, the medullary reticulospinal tract, the origin is the nucleus gigantocellularis, which is located in the reticular formation of the medulla. The course of the tract is, the tract descends down ipsilaterally in the ventral funiculus of the spinal cord, and it terminates on the medial group of neurons and motor neurons, which basically innervates the proximal group of muscles, and the function of the medullary reticulospinal tract is inhibitory. It inhibits any kinds of activity of the motor neurons that innervate the extensor neurons. Sorry. Now, let us go to the last tract, the tectospinal tract. Now, if you look at the tectospinal tract, I have a figure here of the tectospinal tract. The tectospinal tract originates from the superior colliculus. Where exactly of the superior colliculus? From a part called the tectum, which is actually the deep layer of the superior colliculus. Now, let us have a look at the course of this tectospinal tract. You can see that immediately after it originates from the tectum or the superior colliculus, from the deeper layers of the superior colliculus. The fibers decussate or cross over to the opposite side. Now, where does it cross over? Exactly below the periaqueductal gray. All the medial descending pathways descends down ipsilaterally in the brain and the spinal cord, except the tectospinal tract that is actually crossing over to the opposite side. I think that is a very important point you need to note down. All the medial system pathways descends down ipsilaterally in the brain and the spinal cord, except the single tectospinal tract. The fibers from the now the fibers, what happens is, after it comes down, it is actually descending down in the ventral funiculus of the spinal cord, and finally to terminate on the medial group of interneurons and also the motor neurons. And there's one more speciality of the tectospinal tract. This is basically the smallest among the descending tracts, which is extending up to the mid-cervical region of the spinal cord. And the function of the tectospinal tract is the superior colliculus mainly receives visual inputs. Therefore, the function of the tectospinal tract is to regulate contralateral movement of the head in response to visual stimuli. So I think we wind up with the motor tracts or the descending pathways. Now in the next class, I'll be actually discussing about what the upper motor neuron is, what the lower motor neuron is, what is the difference, between the two types of paralysis. So I think in the next class I would tell you all everything about the upper motor neuron, lower motor neuron, and all the diseases affecting it. And after that I think I'll do most probably basal ganglia. So please remember that you be very thorough with the ascending tracts and the descending tracts. Compare the tracts and study, so that the problem with central nervous system or the sensory tract or the descending tract is the scoring is almost like mathematics, because you study so many tracts and you know that how exactly from where the fibers originate, where they cross over, how they come down, the course, termination, everything is so important. And when you have so many tracts to study and you get a single tract as a question to answer, and when you sit to draw in the exam hall, it becomes very confusing unless each tract is in and out thorough for you all. So basically I would want you all to draw all the tracts, all the sensory tracts which has been done by Dr. Mantha, and all the motor tracts which I have done. Just try to draw it on a paper, pin it up, and before exams, you go for exams, you finish at least some 10-15 times of revisions of the tracts, so that there's never a confusion with, because as you draw the graph, as you come down, you're not sure with how the tract actually proceeds. So instead of a tract passing through the lateral funiculars, you draw in such a way that examiner feels that the tract is going through the anterior funiculars, and now the whole thing is wrong. So for CNS, or when you draw the tract, is basically something like you get all the questions correct, or you get it everything wrong by the small errors you would create as you do the answer the question. So I think thanks for listening. Tomorrow's class I'll be doing upper motor neuron, lower motor neuron, the effect of lesions, the difference. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you.